Just a minute. So, Vidya. Sadhana. So welcome to you all on this auspicious Sunday. We are here today again to learn about happiness and how we can get it in our lives through the Buddhist way. And we are very grateful. We have Kaldilla with us, teaching us once again. And thank you so much for spending the weekend. And thank you all for joining us.
Okay, so we're going to continue our discussion on this happiness series, the third module, negative emotions and toxic environments, right? And within that, we've covered four topics. So the fifth topic on attachment and addiction is what we're going to cover today. Is it loud enough? Am I audible at the back? Yes. Yeah, so today we're going to discuss what is the nature of addiction, and then we'll see what kind of approaches we can devise to prevent or maybe even overcome addiction. So before we proceed with the discussion, let's just do a short mindfulness meditation to calm our minds, just clear the chatter in our minds, and help us with our concentration. And we'll also set a good motivation for the setting, for the session. We'll do a couple of prayers before we start. So just make yourself comfortable in your seats, back erect, shoulders straight, arms relaxed, and use the 7-point Vairocana posture. Right palm resting in your left palm, tip of the thumbs touching each other, chin slightly tucked in, and tip of the tongue resting against the upper row of teeth just behind them. And you can keep your eyes either half open or closed. If you're too distracted, maybe instead of keeping your eyes closed. Or if you're keeping them half open, then you can direct the gaze of your eyes just down the tip of your nose in the space in front of you. So just use this posture. And as I said, we'll use a technique called Anapanasmriti, or mindfulness of breath meditation, to help us with focus and concentration. So there are a couple of steps that I'm going to give you instructions on. So just use those guidelines to focus your mind. So start off by bringing the focus of your mind to the area between the tip of your nose and the upper lip, and observe the sensations that you experience there. Or now bring the focus of your mind to your in-breath. Just make a note of which nostril you're breathing in through, and observe the sensations that you experience in that nostril. And as you breathe in, also observe the rising of your chest and the abdomen. Now shift the focus to your out breath and observe the sensations that we experience as you breathe out in the nostril. Also observe the movement of your chest and the abdomen as you breathe out. Now, to further assist you with your concentration, maybe you can do a short counting meditation. So as you breathe in, count 1, 1, and as you breathe out, count 2, 2, and then alternate to 10, and start over again. Repeat the process for a few times. So if your mind wanders and there's some stray thoughts, then just observe it and then bring back your mind to the counting. So now with your minds sufficiently focused, let's just um, a motivation setting for the session. So just remind yourself that in this lifetime, we are blessed with the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments. Uh, but also remind yourself that these freedoms and endowments can be snatched away from us. At the time of death, we'll be separated from these freedoms and endowments, and there's no guarantee that in the next lifetime we'll be united with these freedoms and endowments. So, although in this lifetime we've got this human rebirth and access to the doctrine, there's no certainty that in the next lifetime we will have the same fortune. It's more likely that in the next lifetime we end up in one of the lower realms because of negative karma from the past. And in that case, we'll have to endure a lot of suffering in the lower realms. So ask yourself if you're willing to endure that kind of suffering. Also, if by good fortune, by some chance we are reborn as humans or as devas, or even in the deva realm or in the human realm, there's a lot of suffering, both physical and mental. Uh, so in the human realm, there's suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and dying, and also a lot of mental anguish or frustration, anxiety that we experience. So there's absolutely no place in samsara. Even in the higher realms, there's no freedom from suffering. So there's nothing to trust about our rebirth in samsara. So this one time, we've been blessed with this human form and also access to the doctrine. And we have this wonderful intelligence which we can use to uh, understand uh, the shortcomings of samsara and the benefits of uh, liberation. So just recollect the uh, shortcomings of samsara and also the benefits of liberation, and resolve to work towards liberation from the cycle of suffering in samsara. But then individual liberation is not a sufficient goal. Although we will be liberated, our dear ones would still be trapped in samsara with no access to a doctrine, no access to a method to release them from the influence of the past karma, which is going to lead to a lot of suffering. So uh, these other sentient beings in the world, in the universe, uh, we should all, just like we aspire for liberation for ourselves, we should also aspire for liberation for them and assist them in this pursuit of liberation. So we need some meaningful capacity to help them. And that capacity is possible only if we attain the state of a completely enlightened Buddha. So let's all aspire for that spiritual goal of total omniscience, absolute omniscience, so that we have that capacity to help other sentient beings also. So in this pursuit of omniscience, complete enlightenment, we need some assistance, some guidance, uh, and we seek that guidance and assistance in the three sources of refuge, the three jewels of refuge: the Buddha jewel, the teacher who shows us the path; uh, the Dharma jewel, which is in the nature of the scriptures and the realizations and the mind streams of the disciples who practice the path; and the assembly of the disciples, or the Sangha jewel, who will assist us uh, personally, physically on this path. So, uh, so let's all take refuge in these three jewels and plead with them to show us and guide us on the path towards liberation from this cycle of suffering in samsara. So let's just recite this refuge prayer. Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. Now, with the three jewels of refuge still visualized in space in front of you, uh, make extensive prostrations to the three jewels of refuge. So just imagine infinite copies of yourself pervading the entire space, uh, and offer full-length prostrations to the three jewels. And then also imagine, visualize that the entire space is filled with beautiful, precious offerings, and make these offerings to the three jewels. Also confess all the transgressions and infractions that we have committed to. Seek purification and rejoice in the merit that both we and others have accumulated, will accumulate in the future. And plead with our teachers and spiritual gurus not to pass into nirvana, and continue turning the wheel of dharma and continue guiding us. Let's also direct this merit that we have to the realization of the generation of the mind of awakening in both our minds as well as in a divine stream of other sentient beings. So let's just recite this Bodhicitta prayer. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. So just stay with that mind. Just generate your mind in the aspect of this aspiration for complete enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. I'll just recite one prayer to remove, clear our obstacles for spiritual practice. So we have this booklet. So maybe you can have a look at it. Heart Sutra, Dipti, which page number? Page number 5. Okay, you can just recite this prayer. So I'll just quickly recite it. नमः सर्वज्ञाय एवं श्रुतमेकस्मिन् समये भगवान् राजगुरुविहरति स्म दूर्धकूटे पर्वते महता वृक्षसङ्गेन साधर्मता च बोधिसत्त्वसङ्गेन तेन खलु समेन भगवान् गम्भीरावसम्बोधं नाम समाधिं समापन्नः तेन च समेन आर्यवृत्तेश्वरो बोधिसत्त्वमहासत्त्व गम्भीरायां प्रज्ञापारमितायां चर्यां चर्मान् एवं विवलोकति स्म पञ्चस्कन्धास्तान् च स्वभावशून्यान् विवलोकति अथायुष्मान शारिपुत्र बुद्धानुभावेन आर्यवृत्तेश्वरं बोधिसत्त्वमेतद्वोचत एकश्चिन् कुलपुत्र गम्भीरायां प्रज्ञापारमितायां चर्यां चर्तुकामकतं शिक्षितव्य एव भक्त्यार्यवृत्तेश्वर बोधिसत्त्वमासत्त्वायुष्यमन्तं शारिपुत्रमेतद्वोचत एकश्चिन् शारिपुत्र कुलपुत्र वा कुलदुहिता अवास्याम गम्भीरायां प्रज्ञापारमितायां चर्यां चर्तुकामकतं चर्यामचर्तुकामतेनेव विवलोकितव्यं पञ्चस्कन्धास्तान् च स्वभावशून्यान् समनुपश्यति स्म रूपं शून्यता शून्यतैव रूपं रूपान् पृथक् शून्यता शून्यतान् पृथक् रूपं यद् रूपं सा शून्यता या शून्यता तद् रूपम् एवं वेदना संन्यास संस्कार विज्ञानानि च शून्यता एवं शारिपुत्र सर्वधर्मा शून्यता लक्षणान् उत्पन्नानि लुब्धाम्ला विम्ला अनुना सम्पूर्णाः तस्मात् तर्हि शारिपुत्र शून्यतां न रूपं न वेदना न संज्ञा न संस्कार न विज्ञानं न चक्षुः न श्रोतं न घ्राणं न जीवा न कायो न मनो न रूपं न शब्दो न गन्धो न रसो न स्पष्टव्यं न धर्मं न चक्षुर्धातुर्यावन्न मनोधातुर्न धर्मधातुर्न मनोविज्ञानधातु न विद्या न विद्यानशय यावन्न जरामरणं न जरामरणक्षय न दुःखसमुदय निरोध मार्ग न ज्ञानं न प्राप्तिर्न प्राप्तिर् तस्माच्च शारिपुत्र प्राप्तित्वेन बोधिसत्त्वा नाम प्रज्ञापारमिताश्रित विहरति चित्तावर्ण चित्तावरणास्तित्वाद त्रस्तो विपर्यासति क्रांतो निष्ठ निर्वाण त्रयदोविस्तः सर्वबुद्धा प्रज्ञापारमिताश्रित्यानुत्तरां समय सम्बोधिमपि सम्बुद्धाः तस्माद् ज्ञातव्य प्रज्ञापारमिता महामन्त्र अनुत्तर मंत्र समसम मंत्र सर्वदुःख प्रशमन मंत्र सत्यमित्यत्वाद प्रज्ञापारमिता मुक्त मंत्र तत्तागते गते पारगते पारसंगते बोधि स्वाहा तत्तागते गते पारगते पारसंगते बोधि स्वाहा तत्तागते गते पारगते पारसंगते बोधि स्वाहा एवं शारिपुत्र गंभीरायाम प्रज्ञापारमितायाम चर्यायाम शिक्षितव्यं बोधिसत्त्वेन अथ खलु भगवान् तस्मात् समाधिर्भूतायार्योलुप्तेश्वरस्य बोधिसत्त्वस्य साधु कर्मदात् साधु साधु कुलपुत्र एवमेतद् कुलपुत्र एवमेतद् गम्भीरायां प्रज्ञापारमितायां चर्यां कर्तव्यं यथा निर्दिष्टमनुमोदते तथागतहद्भि इदं वोच भगवान् आनन्दमन आयुष्यमान् शारिपुत्र आर्यवृत्तेश्वरश्च बोधिसत्त्वसा च सर्वावधि परिषत्सदे मानुष असुर गन्धर्वश्च लोक भगवतो भाषितम् अभिनन्दनेति प्रज्ञापारमित हृदय सूत्रं समाप्तम्. Okay, so we have set motivation and also recited a prayer to remove our spiritual obstacles. So let's begin our discussion for the day, for the session today. So as I said, we're going to discuss approaches to find release from addiction, which is a special instance of attachment. So I intend to cover this subject through these 6 parts. So initially start off by identifying what is the nature, what is the definition of addiction. So you'll have to help me in identifying some sort of a definition for addiction. And then we'll also identify what are the risk factors or the causal process that drives addiction. And then to get a better understanding of what addiction looks like, we'll identify what are the different kinds of experiential characteristics of addiction. And then we'll see if there are some components that we can identify, core components, critical components of addiction or addictive behavior, any type of addiction. And then we'll look at some specific application of addiction, something that is closer to home. So some near home instance of addiction. I mean, when we think of addiction, we always think about excessive substance use or other forms of addictive behavior. But maybe there are instances of addictive behavior closer home, as in something that we are also guilty of being trapped in or being engaged with. So near home instances of addiction, and then the fifth part, we see if there's some sort of a pre-addiction process that we can identify, and if there's any critical point that indicates that okay, now we are entering a different, more serious phase of addiction. So if we can identify that pre-addiction process, then we should be able to then identify some tools that we can use to regulate the addiction. And then finally, we'll see what we can do to prevent or overcome addiction. So let's start off by identifying the definition of addiction. So what do you think are the different characteristics of addiction? Can you think of any properties of addiction? Yeah.
Obsessive thoughts.
Obsessive thoughts, yes. Compulsive use, compulsive behavior, yes. Okay. Anything else? Addiction.
Dependency on something external.
Dependency on something external. That be a necessary condition. Okay, that's how it manifests, right? Yeah. Okay.
Escaping pain.
Sorry?
Escaping pain, suffering.
Pain, yeah, that's an important point. Yeah. Escaping pain. So it's a response. Addiction is a response. It's a distraction from something that we want to avoid, escaping pain. Yes. Anything else? Any other property? Organic.
It's the meaning to say that it's physical. It's supposed to be having preparing as cigarette industry. Genetically also there.
Okay, yeah, that's the point of debate here, whether addiction is genetic. Yeah.
Sort of psychological dependence that's actually harmful.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if we say it's something to escape pain, we can also say food is addictive because we consume food in order to.
Yeah, that's an important point that you make. It's a psychological response also. And there's some harm that comes to you if you, engage in addictive behavior. You're right, but you could be addicted to food if it becomes excessive consumption, even excessive consumption of food beyond what is needed to support your body can be seen as addiction. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, that's that's kind of the foundational aspect of addiction. So any kind of pleasurable experience can actually manifest as an addiction if you engage with it inappropriately. There's no moderation in your consumption of that source of pleasure. Yeah. So yeah, and an important aspect that Sadhana said, that there is this possibility of harm coming through this excessive engagement with that source of pleasure. So with two very important points about addiction, it's a rapid pursuit of instant gratification. So there's some source of pleasure and you seek instant gratification, immediate gratification. And there's an overwhelming involvement with the source of addiction. So there's almost compulsive use and compulsive engagement with the source of addiction. So compulsive use does not necessarily just imply it's not just a matter of frequency or the amount of usage, but it pertains to the kind of role it assumes in your life, in your daily routine. You know, for example, cancer patient, who's on chemotherapy, um, the person has to kind of rely on intake of drugs, chemicals, and dosage has to keep going up. Yeah, the body builds up some resistance, but it's not done for this what do you say, gratification. There's excessive usage of a drug there, but it's not for gratification. So this compulsory use, there's no compulsory use per se there, although there's excessive usage of drug. And there's no overwhelming involvement there, as in the person is not looking forward to taking the drugs. Here, in the case of addiction, the person is actually looking forward. He's kind of craving to consume that source of addiction. It could be a substance, it could be an addictive behavior. And as I said, this compulsive use also pertains to the matter, to the place, the importance that the person places on that source of addiction in his life. So the meaning that it assumes in that person's life. So in all those respects, it kind of indicates an overwhelming involvement with the source of addiction. And then what Sadhan, you said, Anshuman said, there's also this risk of harm coming through your engagement with the source of addiction. So there's severe damage, both physical as well as psychological, mental. And one probably is aware of this, but still wants to engage with it. So there's severe damage, not just to yourself, but also to people around you, both physical and emotional. And then there's this always the sense of anticipation. You're looking forward to. Yes, that's the overwhelming involvement of it. So it consumes your mind space. So sometimes the entire day is dedicated to, taking care of this addiction. You may not, I mean, the actual consumption of the substance or the addictive behavior will probably be done at the end of the day, but you're forever kind of thinking about it. You're preparing for that consumption towards the end of the day. Sorry? It's hell. Hell. It does not have to be a substance.
It can be a person, it can be a partner, it can be a. That becomes a bad habit.
Yeah. So yeah, substance is just an example. So you're right. I mean, addiction be towards. I mean, you're talking about an addictive behavior. Yeah. The source could be even a person. So the addict is a person who consumes the source of his addiction for the sake of consuming it. It's not for some other end. So the addiction itself becomes the end, so to say. So it's not helping him meet another end. So these are some of the aspects of addiction. And if we kind of put it together in the form of a definition, the person who is addicted, you can say that he uses either a substance or engages in an addictive behavior for which there are rewarding effects. There's a reward that he experiences through pleasure, maybe. And that rewarding effect provides a compelling kind of incentive for the person to repeat the addictive behaviors, to repeat the activity. So there's rewarding effect, and then there's compelling incentive to repeat the activity. And despite awareness of detrimental consequences. So that's also an important part. The person is aware of the negative consequences. But in spite of that awareness, in spite of these detrimental consequences, the person still wants to go back to the source of addiction because it has this rewarding effect. So that's probably the nature of addiction. So is there anything else that you would want to add to this definition? Anything else?
So it feels like
Yes.
and there's no it's like cyclical. It's like a
Yes. It keeps him trapped in that cycle. Yes. Yeah, this is circularity. Yeah, that's right. So Yes, yeah, that's right. I mean, it can take on different forms, addictive behavior. You're right. It's something that we'll come to in our discussion. Yeah. Okay. Uh, so, as Sadhana had mentioned, I mean, there's always some sort of a pleasurable sensation that drives the addiction. Sorry? Okay. Yeah, yeah. Waiting for it, and once you want it back again. Yes, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So there's a feedback again. So yeah, that's the rewarding effect that we were talking about. That's the rewarding effect. So reward could be specifically in terms of release of these kind of chemicals, the serotonin and dopamine and all that. Yeah. Okay, and so if you look at the causes, I mean, it's difficult to identify specific causes, but usually there are lots of social, psychological or environmental factors that could be risk factors that could be driving your addiction. So, what are these psychological and environmental factors? So, let's just look at that. Can you identify some psychological risk factors that drive? Trauma is one. Yes, yes, that's right. Yeah. Trauma. Any other? Low self-esteem. Yes, yes, yeah, it's true. Others? Anyone? Physical pain. Yeah, that's. Sorry. That actor from Friends. There's a TV series. TV series. And in that, one of the characters was so. He died in last year. Beat for the past 25. It started with him basically drinking with his friends. But when he had a fall, that had toxicity. That led to okay. Getting addicted to that substance. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson combination of alcohol and. So yeah, let's psychological factors. Yeah. So other psychological.
Lack of mindfulness.
Sorry.
Lack of mindfulness.
Yeah, there's an element of heedlessness, mindlessness at the root of most of our addictions. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yeah. Psychological factors, others, any other? Emotional factors, yeah. Loneliness is one. Yes. Yeah. Right. So, yeah. So,
social factors,
social
peer
factors.
pressure.
Yeah, peer pressure is one. Yeah. True. True. So yeah, we are identifying the social, psychological, and environmental factors, risk factors. So social factors is one very important risk factor. Yeah. Peer pressure is one important. So impulsivity is considered to be a very important characteristic of a person, personality trait that drives a person towards addiction. So impulsivity and sensation seeking, you will find that some people are more impulsive and more prone to seeking of sensations. Yeah. So person who has higher levels of impulsivity and sensation seeking would be at risk to develop addiction. Could be towards a substance or to be towards maybe addictive behavior. So impulsivity also is an important factor that is related to relapse. So a person might have paused his addiction for a while, but if the impulsivity still continues, then it can be a factor for relapse into the addiction. Trauma, as Deepti had said, so early exposure to some significant mental or physical abuse, maybe, or adverse experiences in the past, those could trigger addiction, could drive a person towards addiction. No? Wrong view. Wrong views. Because the addictive mind, I have a bit of addiction for food. It tells you that nothing is going to happen. It's actually for your benefit. Yes. Yeah, yeah.
And the mind is constantly chattering and diverting you, giving. There is um, there is no clarity here. So you are basically under the sway of whatever the brain is.
That's right. Yeah.
It's not very easy. Even if you're mindful in the morning, you don't know when you're.
Yes.
So it's not.
Yeah, that's right. So it's an important
Mind
point.
is
Yeah.
lying constant.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. So these are aspects that will come up in our discussion. In fact, when we talk about a framework to deal with addiction, what you just mentioned, wrong view, and a suboptimal kind of philosophical view of life. Yeah. Maybe that also contributes to uh, addiction. Yeah. Okay, so trauma and then there are mental health factors. If a person is in depression or is experiencing severe anxiety um, or post-traumatic experiences, then even in that situation, there's a risk of addiction. So these are some of the psychological factors. Can you think about some environmental factors? Yes. Yes, yes, yeah. So
The proximity to the addictive object, the
yes, yes, the
proximity also
proximity,
matters.
so easy accessibility of the source of addiction. You're right, yeah. So environmental factor, easy accessibility is one. Yeah. Yes. So yeah, we can include that in the psychological factor. Yeah, right. Yeah. And other environmental factors, easy accessibility. Yes. So yeah, uh, a peer group which can drive you towards addiction. Yeah. So that's what Madhvi also mentioned. Yeah. So that brings coffee, so I drink coffee. So yeah, that's also an important point. So yeah, family factors. So family factors can influence. So having a parent or a sibling with an addictive disorder, yeah, coffee is innocuous, but in other serious forms of addiction, if the person has a family member who is a heavy alcohol drinker, then it's possible that that person also takes up the same habit. Yeah, so it raises the risk. So these are risk factors. It's not necessary that that person follows in the father's or the siblings' footsteps. So having a parent or a sibling with a addictive disorder, and then if there are family disruptions, so or troubled relationship between parents and children, or family disruption like a divorce or something, even that can drive you towards some addiction. Accessibility factor, as Lavanya mentioned, if there's easy accessibility to the source of addiction, alcohol or other substances, either at home or at school or at work, then uh, also there's a higher risk of the person falling into addiction. Then peer group, as Madhvi had mentioned, we are all social animals, so we want to be part of a group. We want to be accepted by the group. We want ourselves to be liked by the group. So, the group supports some consumption of alcohol, maybe, or some other addictive substance. And you also kind of fall into the trap because you want to belong to the group. So, peer group pressure is an important environmental factor, and maybe you know employment status. A person, if he's gainfully employed, he's busy with things, is less likely to be drawn towards. Huh? Not really. Yeah. No, it's not. Because since it's a mind, there are so many people who are very well employed in the higher. Because there are other factors in play also, right? So we're not saying that this factor is there in isolation. Yeah. For some people, maybe even just this factor could drive the person towards alcohol consumption. Person who's unemployed, and what she was referring to, hopelessness, no prospect of getting a job. When they got, yeah, life looks like a burden, and takes up alcohol, took in that feeling of life feeling like a burden. So yeah, employment status could also be one of the factors.
Lack of, can I say? lack of knowledge. As in, when cigarettes were first introduced, donkeys years back, there was no knowledge that these are actually going to be harmful for humans. Or like opioid addiction.
Absolutely.
When they get prescribed those opioids, they don't know that, it's going to be addictive. So it is lack of knowledge in so many people, like maybe in India, people without education consume lots of sugar, not knowing that it has adverse effects. So yeah, lack of knowledge in the
That's true, yeah.
environment.
Lack of knowledge about the harmful effects of the substance that you're consuming. Yeah, you're right. It's only after a long time that the negative effects of those substances become evident. But by that time, it's too late. Some people have already gotten addicted to it, and it's part of your life. Yeah. So yeah, so these are some of the psychological and environmental factors, risk factors that would drive a person towards addiction. So there's something that addiction connotes, and you know. Uh, so when we speak about the etymology of addiction itself, it comes from a legal term apparently, and it was used in legal sense. The person who's addicted is said to have surrendered or is obligated or spoken over to a master. So it was in that sense that the term addict was used. So here, it's talking about some sort of a surrendering to a master. So some sort of bondage or enslavement to a master. So addicts in that sense are no longer free to enter into new relationships, responsibilities, encumbrances. So, so that's an important aspect of addiction. Again, it kind of uh, leads to some sort of bondage and enslavement to the source of addiction. So addicts addict themselves to the source of addiction. They kind of speak themselves over to the source of addiction. They become subservient to the new master, which is the source of addiction. And they renounce all their claims over their own lives. So there's a loss of freedom, there's a loss of liberty. So addiction has this connotation of being bonded to something. So it has this connotation of bondage and enslavement. So these are all some of the typical aspects of addiction. So let's look at what kind of experiential characteristics does addiction display. So there are 7 of them that I've identified here. So there's temptation, of course. So addiction as tempting, yeah. So it's not just mere temptation to the substance or the addictive behavior. It is actually temptation to consuming that substance addictively. So it's a second order kind of temptation. So our experience, one experience is a temptation to repeat the substance taking or the addictive behavior in a compulsive way. So that's the nature of this influence, the temptation. So if you yield to that temptation, then it finally leads to addiction. And it's tempting to use the substance or the addictive behavior addictively. So it's not just the first few times that you use it because you fall prey to the temptation of seeking the pleasure that you, experiencing the pleasure that you get from consuming the substance. But you get to a point where the substance is telling you that, okay, get addicted to me, and you fall prey to that temptation. So that's one characteristic of addiction. And then there's this aspect of addiction that it is kind of pain relieving. It is sedating, it is tranquilizing. It's not only about substances, it's also about addictive behavior. So you feel restless or irritable and generally contented. And then if you're deprived of access to the source of addiction, and then you get access to the source of addiction, and the relief that you experience is immediate. So there's this almost a tranquilizing effect that addiction has. So for that one fleeting moment when you have access to the source of addiction after having been deprived of that access, you experience immense relief. And of course, whatever remorse or horror is going to follow past that experience, you're not worried about that at that moment. So addiction has this aspect of tranquilizing. It has this effect of being a tranquilizer. And then an important experiential characteristic of addiction, which Sadhana briefly referred to. So addiction is some sort of a burden reliever. It's something that simplifies your life. So it's a simplifier of your life. In what sense? It relieves us of the responsibility for ourselves and our lives. Life becomes extremely simple in the process of uh, that addiction that you're engaging in. So all questions about life, its purpose, its goal, its direction, these are kind of answered, apparently answered, of course, not really answered, but the addict feels that these have been answered when he engages in that addiction. And all matters of priorities have been settled and all tensions have been resolved. So, you kind of, the addiction gives meaning to life. Yeah. Or in fact, the addiction becomes the meaning of life in that case. So, in that sense, addiction can be seen as some sort of a burden reliever. So the person is burdened by this expectation from him to define the goal of his life, the meaning of his life, the direction of his life. He has to kind of give meaning to his life, specific kind of commitments, specific kind of dedication, and a routine that he needs to persevere on a daily basis. All that is kind of taken care of when the person engages in this addiction. So addiction has this experiential characteristic as something that can simplify one's life or relieve one's burden. And then it has this aspect or the quality of being able to entrap the person who's addicted. So addiction has entrapping or entangling, something that Deepti had mentioned. So you'll notice that the person who's addicted is kind of generally busy with some sort of a routine all the time. So he has this rituals, repetitive kind of behaviors. For a person who's observing from outside, it all looks very mundane and very meaningless. But for him, it keeps him busy through the day. So his entire kind of time during the course of the day is consumed through these repetitive kind of behaviors, this mechanical, ritualistic behavior. It is the focus of his attention. So, and then the person also kind of uh, finds that a bulk of his time is used in um, either deceiving people or conniving or conning people to ensure that he has access to the source of addiction. So he kind of tries different ways to keep feeding his addiction. So in all this sense, the addiction becomes entrapping or entangling for him. And there's this entanglement becomes more strong and intense as the addiction progresses. So there's a perpetual escalation of this entanglement. So addiction, it involves the whole of his life. The person who is an addicted involves the entirety of his life. It's not only one part of his life. It affects all aspects of his life. Maybe there's a difference in terms of the manner in which it is involved or the degree to which it is involved, but it involves the entirety of his life. So that's the fourth experiential characteristic. And then addiction has this characteristic of being alienating. In what sense? Can you tell me? How does it alienate?
So, um, it's not a shared experience.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You are filtering and selling or what you are drinking and start becoming responsible for what's family.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. Precisely. In that sense, it divides families. It separates friends and fragments communities. So addiction demands priority. It wants to become the focus of the person's attention. So addiction becomes the priority of a person's emotional life, the addict's emotional life. And it constantly tries to take sole possession of the addict's heart. So in that sense, it's alienating. It kind of alienates that person from the rest of the society, and it also alienates the person from himself. So addiction has taken over a person's life also. So it deprives the addict ownership of his own life. So the addiction is a mere expression of his life becomes an expression of the person's underlying addiction. So in that sense, addiction is alienating. So that's the fifth experiential characteristic. And then there's the characteristic that takes up, that's something Deepti had mentioned. So addiction is self-disguising. So yeah, it's also sometimes said that addiction is a disease of denial. So the person who is addicted, finds it extremely difficult to acknowledge his addiction. Um, just like a person who's had a severe trauma would want to kind of, conceal, uh, hide the trauma, erect some sort of defense mechanism, mostly in the form of denial of that traumatic experience. Similarly, the person who is addicted wants to kind of conceal his addiction. It's a defense mechanism. So the self-esteem of the person who's addicted to the addiction, and maybe it's too fragile for him to admit that he's become an addict. Yeah. So he erects this defense mechanism in form of denial. So it's essentially with the intent to keep feeding the addictive practice. So that is the person says that okay, I'm not hooked and I can quit anytime if I want to. So that's the general attitude that the person has. So in that respect, addiction is self-disguising. And then there's the last experiential characters that it is self-perpetuating. So the person who has the addictive behavior, maybe he wants to kind of quit the addictive behavior, the addiction, but then addiction fights back. It puts up a stubborn resistance from its side, and it resists any kind of attempts to change. So in that sense, addiction becomes self-perpetuating. So these are some of the experiential characteristics of addiction, and we'll try and relate these experiential characteristics to some maybe similar behavior in our lives also, and see whether some behaviors in our life mirror some of these experiential characteristics. So we'll do that after the part.
You're missing, the strategizing all the time to feed that need. You're losing control.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
Always negative.
Addiction. Uh, Addiction, I would say, is negative. Yeah.
Addiction. I think
Like, give me an example.
it's a personal example for me. I used to be addicted to smoking. I was smoking for about 32 years and that's many instances it saved me from self-harm, from suicide. So I decide that I'm going to not swallow this now. Since I get to know. Very good. And I would say, all right, now, no, it's not, now I'm really ready. So it's a form of refuge. No, I'm very from you. And when I saw when I got married, so
Yeah, as long as you have the sense that
this particular thing is bad,
well, as long as you have the sense of control, uh,
There was times when I could make myself
if you're aware to the extent that okay, this is replacing something that is far more negative.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Did they give us?
So in I mean the kind of description. Mhm.
That's my point.
Well, as
Yeah, when you're on LSD.
so yeah, when you speak about a continuum, you're thinking about a future that is the present leading to a better future, and you're also kind of indicating that you have some control over the process, that you're in control of the process, and you can direct the present to a better future. If that is the case, then yeah, maybe you can qualify. So if there's no control, then I think whatever definitions we've seen, and these are clinically, these are definitions which are prescribed by researchers who study clinical psychology. That. So if it is deprived of this element of control, then I think it qualifies as addiction. Yeah. It will qualify as
Venerable,
addiction.
Venerable.
Sorry?
My father used to smoke one pack of
Uh-huh.
cigarettes. And he used to work in the night. And he would say,
Yeah.
just had to be up. So he
Yeah.
would, to give himself, he and his friend would go out for a smoke, and it became a pattern until something external shakes you.
Hmm.
So he had, there's a diagnosis for diabetes and hypertension. Until that came, he kept it to it. Then it was an external. Family, what will happen, young family. So then there's something, no, it's not helping. He stopped, the external thing stopped him from doing it.
Okay, we'll continue with the discussion maybe over tea, maybe, yeah. So let's break for tea and then assemble in 5 minutes, yeah. We can continue discussing it during the break. Yeah. So yeah, Lavanya, you were mentioning something.
Yes,
Maybe we do that after the break, yeah.
no problem.
There's books that coming. I don't. I don't. I'll be spending time. Pujas and all that. Shanti, tomato sauce. Tomato sauce. Yeah.
It's there.
We're doing once a week on Saturday.
Maybe then.
We want to take over now. So the thing is, we need social media. So we need link as well. We give all the material. We're starting new programs. We give you a supervisor on this. Other yes, one of these and the success. That's not beverage. Both sides care about it.
Would you like samosas?
Yeah.
Yeah? Good, the samosas. Wasn't she? Yeah?
Secretly like samosa. When she feels like eating it, we all have a part.
So these are supposed to be some. These are supposed to be famous samosas, is it? Which place? Oh, what's the name of this place? Samosa Party. Balti. Party. Okay. And you order what? A bucket of samosa.
These are
What? No, I just heard about it. Okay, let's just summarize the discussion that we've had so far. So, we can identify some core components that describe any type of addiction, whether it is substance addiction or addictive behavior. So, the first one is that it exhibits this property of being very prominent in the person's life. So it gets deeply kind of integrated into a person's daily routine. It dominates the person's thinking and dictates his emotions. Yeah. So whatever addiction it is, whether it is addiction to a substance or to an addictive behavior, it exhibits this property of being very salient in that person's life or being very prominent. So this property of salience or prominence. And then there's the property of mood elevation. So you experience rapture, of course. It, the addiction is usually towards things that provide you a pleasurable experience. So there's also this feeling of anticipation or excitement, both before the consumption of the substance or engagement in the addictive behavior, as well as after. So aspect of rapture or mood elevation. And then something that you would have all heard of this property of tolerance. So what do we mean by tolerance? Any idea? Tolerance? That is, remotely. Uh, yes. Yeah. 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 So yeah, ever increasing, the need for an ever increasing dose. So whatever, whether it is substance or even addictive behavior, gambling or anything like that, uh, it exhibits this quality of tolerance. So addresses the need for an ever increasing dose of the behaviors to achieve the same desired level of happiness or high. And then there's something called withdrawal symptoms. Again, yeah. What is withdrawal symptoms? Anyone?
When your body kind of attacks you, it's almost like punishment.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yes, right. So the feeling of stress or irritability or desperation or anxiousness, or maybe even in some cases panic when you're separated from the source of addiction. So that's withdrawal symptoms. And then we address this point. It exhibits this property of conflict. So it creates this distance between yourself and the friends, families, uh, between yourself and the rest of the society. So whether it is through argument over usage of that substance or engagement in that addictive behavior, it leads to conflict. And the property of relapse. So you might want to, we acknowledge that behavior is addictive, but even if you try to kind of further take yourself away from that um, activity or that consumption of that substance, you still kind of keep coming back to it, uh, wanting to experience the same kind of high again. So relapse. So these are the six components. What are those? There's prominence, there's mood elevation or rapture, then there's tolerance and withdrawal symptoms, and or conflict and relapse. So now let's see whether we can apply it to something that is closer home, as in uh, whether we can identify behaviors in our own experience which exhibit these kind of properties, these kind of experiential characteristics. So can you think about something from your own life?
Yeah, I actually wanted to share this my personal experience with addiction. Like one thing that I've realized is that addiction need not be substance or something that big, something that we may not even notice, like addiction to morning coffee, addiction to to be in the space where wanting to be constantly connected to somebody, and addiction to screen. See, these were my addictions. Okay, what I have learned is that I lack flexibility when I am addicted to this. But if I have to be in touch with somebody constantly, I lack flexibility at work in my routine, and I'm also disturbing others. And it is not, it begins as self-indulgence, and we think that it is not harming anybody, it is about myself, but ultimately we are harming others, people who we live with, people who we are involved at work. So, um, addiction, when we use the word addiction, it looks big, but something like a bad habit, which we may not even be mindful of in our daily life, can be really, really harmful to us. And especially as mothers and teachers and service providers, it is something to be very, uh, we have to be very vigilant of these things. Addiction can be really harmful.
Yeah, and this the audio isn't really clear, but from what I gather from what I could make sense from what you said, you're talking about addiction to uh, staying connected with other people, right? To some people rather. Yeah, so yeah, that's you're right. I mean, whether it qualifies as an addiction or not is something to be examined. We can, that's the reason we try to draw out this list of four components of addictive behavior or addiction. Also, the experiential characteristics that describe addiction. So whether it qualifies as an addiction or not, we'll have to kind of check ourselves. Yeah. Phone addiction, yes. Yeah.
I see. I say like he's like, no, I'm just looking at the news.
Yeah, in fact, yeah. Cell phone addiction, yeah. Very ubiquitous. In fact, that's something that I wanted to discuss as an example, a specific example, because I'm sure everyone in this room or online has experienced some sort of addiction towards either. I mean, cell phone is the medium, of course. You consume you engage in addictive activities through your cell phone. So you can speak about addiction to the medium, also addiction to the activities that you engage in through that medium. So yeah.
Venerable.
Yeah.
So addiction is a form of attachment, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say it is. It is a form of attachment. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, any other addiction that food addiction, yes. Food addiction, yes. Food addiction. Laziness is laziness an addiction? I wouldn't say it's an addiction. It's just a negative kind of affliction, negative state. Yeah.
Addiction to, sorry,
Yeah,
addiction to exercise.
exercising, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not guilty of that.
Engagement with exercising, yes. Yeah, it could be addictive.
Non-virtuous people can get addicted.
Non-virtuous people can get addicted. It is an addictive behavior, yes. Yeah.
I mean, I know that workplace it happens.
Yeah, gossiping can be an addictive activity, yes. Yeah. OCD. Okay, compulsive engagement with something. But
it's not pleasurable at all.
yeah, so my addiction has to be towards something that is a source of pleasure. And then there also has to be the aspect that it is harming you and others in some way.
But OCD kind of tells you, for example, that if you don't do this, it's more.
No.
Don't do this.
So last time when we had a discussion on fear and anxiety, in fact, OCD was one of the affiliate manifestations of fear and anxiety. So it could lead to an addiction, maybe, but itself is not an addiction, I would say. Yeah, so let's focus on something that all of us are facing. smartphone addiction. Yeah, smartphone addiction. So, how would you define a smartphone addict?
Neck
Neck bend. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Like I went out yesterday intentionally, I guess I left it plugged in and I walked out without it. And then I was like, wait, what if I need it? I didn't go back and get it, but it definitely caused me some like anxiety knowing I didn't have it on me.
Yeah.
How can I function in the world?
Without the phone, yeah. So yeah, smartphone addict. Yeah, so as we evolve, even genetically, I was thinking that uh, because it's become so ubiquitous, you know, maybe future generations will be born with our necks bent like this, with the shoulder touching the ear, with a slight, cell phone inserting space here. So yeah, so we don't need, or maybe here itself is it? Okay. Yeah, so it's really become ubiquitous now. So smartphone addict is somebody who engages in excessive and disruptive use of the smartphone, of course. And the use of smartphone is deeply ingrained in his life, in his daily routine. And it creates conflict for him or her and the others around him. So excessive, it is disruptive and assumed an important place in his daily routine. So it's deeply ingrained in his daily routine. So somebody had very smartly noted, observed that my life has become a major distraction from my cell phone. It's very true about what we are experiencing right now. So let's see whether our engagement with our smartphones qualifies as an addiction. So there's this list of symptoms that an addict exhibits, whether it's towards an addictive substance or towards addictive behavior. So there are 11 different symptoms for substance addiction. So I'll just read through this, see whether you can relate to any of these. Yeah. So taking the substance in larger amounts or for longer than you meant. Wanting to cut down on or stop using the substance, but not managing to. Spending a lot of time getting, using, or recovering from use of the substance. Cravings and urges to use the substance. Not managing to do what you should at work, home, or school because of substance use. So, yeah, even in our campus, you can see it's really affecting our routines there. Yeah? There are a lot of activities that we need to do in the morning. And of course, people have been busy through night with different kinds of activities on the cell phone, mostly gaming, I guess. And it compromises their ability to do things in the morning. So not managing to do what you should at work, home, or school because of substance use. Continue to use even when it causes problems in relationships. Giving up important social, occupational, or recreational activities because of substance use. Using substances again and again, even when it puts you in danger. Continuing to use even when you know you have a physical or a psychological problem that could have been caused or made worse by the substance. Needing more of the substance to get the effect you want. So that's tolerance, right? And development of withdrawal symptoms, which can be relieved by taking more of the substance. So can you think about your engagement with smartphones as an addiction? If you look at these 11 symptoms, if you replaced the word substance here with cell phone usage or cell phone, kind of we exhibit this similar kind of symptoms in our engagement with the cell phone. So maybe it does excessive use would probably qualify as addictions, smartphone addiction. So if you so when we said that cell phone is the medium, but there are lots of activities that you use it for. So there's surfing, searching, social media, and what else do you have? Gaming, shopping. What else? Selfies, okay. Connecting with other people, yes. So,
News,
sorry?
for news.
For news, yes. So you keep searching for news there. Yeah. Information consuming of information. Yeah. Most cases, I find that we have a overload of information. So we load our memories with unwanted information. Yeah. Uh, okay. So you can do this test for yourself. Just replace the word substance with cell phone and see whether we exhibit these symptoms of cell phone addiction, smartphone addiction. Yeah, and then there are also 9 symptoms of behavior addiction. So we spoke about activities that we engage in through the cell phone, uh, shopping, then social media, searching for information, news, etc. So let's see if that kind of engagement would qualify as behavior addiction. So the 9 symptoms of behavior addiction again, this is specific to gambling. Yeah. So needs to gamble with increasing amounts of money in order to achieve the desired excitement. Can you think about a parallel in the smartphone world, in the I world? Gaming, yes. So yeah,
But also this the adrenaline junkies that are doing this find when they take bikes near my house, you see young girls who take their bikes.
Yeah, so sensation seeking, yeah. Yeah. So needs to gamble with increasing amounts of money in order to achieve the desired excitement. So gaming, yeah, gaming, people who are addicted to gaming exhibit this symptom. Is restless or irritable when attempting to cut down or stop gambling. Again, exhibited by people who are addicted to gaming. So you could replace the word gamble with gaming and all the symptoms would probably apply. So the third symptom is has made repeated unsuccessful efforts to control, cut back or stop gambling, is often preoccupied with gambling, having persistent thoughts of relieving past gambling experiences, handicapping or planning the next venture, thinking about ways to get money with which to gamble, often gambles when feeling distressed. Yeah, there has to be a trigger, right? So it could be some sort of anxiety or depression or some sense of helplessness. So that kind of distress triggers this urge to engage in gaming or gambling. And after losing money, gambling often returns another day to get even. So he has this urge to get even. So he's lost money with the gambling activity and he wants to get even. Lies to conceal the extent of involvement with gambling. Again, I've noticed this in some people who are addicted to gaming. Yeah. You ask them, okay, have you been up all night gaming? And the person, of course, says, no, I went to bed at 11. So all kinds of lies are told. Has jeopardized or lost a significant relationship, job, or education or career opportunity because of gambling. Again, you see this because of this addiction to this activity of gaming. People are not able to concentrate on the activities either at work or in school. Relies on others to provide money to relieve desperate financial situations caused by gambling. So again, here, if you replace the word gambling with gaming, I'm sure you'll find that a lot of people who are addicted, who are engaged in gaming, excessive gaming, exhibit these symptoms, and hence we could say that they are addicted to gaming. So symptoms of cell phone addiction, of course, excessive use, the failure to fulfill your important obligations at work, school, or home. People have this habit of using cell phones in situations which is hazardous. Can you think about that kind of usage?
Driving.
While driving, you're right. Yeah. Sorry.
Some girls, young couple from India, went to someplace in North America, stood at the top of a cliff to take a selfie and
Yes. Yeah. It's become very common these days, yeah. You keep hearing about these kind of accidents. Yeah. Yeah. Withdrawal, including feelings of anger, tension, and or depression when the cell phone is inaccessible. So I know about this. Yeah, young monk who was, heavy into gaming, and his mentor took the phone away from him. And he kind of, in fact, it happened with my mentee also. So he stayed for a day or two, and then he came back to me and said, I can't stay without my phone. Please give it back to me. Give it. I'll do anything else, but don't take my phone away from me. So yeah, people have these kind of withdrawal symptoms. Tolerance. What form does this symptom take with cell phone addicts? Tolerance.
You can start more and more time.
More time, yes.
Start with 1 hour.
Yes.
Then you do scrolling.
Yes, yes, yeah. What other form? Any other forms? The time, of course, yes.
Binge watching.
Binge watching, yes, yeah. It's all kind of, the content is created for us to engage in binge watching, yes.
So when also sometimes happens with me, when you are fast asleep, security blankets, right? They take a toy. Like for me, it's happened a couple of times. Like I'm looking, okay, it's my phone there, then I'm.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Sense of security, yes. Yeah. So for smartphone addicts, tolerance actually manifests also in this feeling that I need a better cell phone. So yeah, every 6 months you see people who are buying a new phone every 6 months, or buying better computer equipment, more software, more RAM. Yeah. So tolerance does manifest in those ways. And of course, there are negative repercussions. We engage in excessive use of cell phones. So this poor achievement on work front, in school, the social isolation. Of course, the person is fatigued all the time. So these are all symptoms of cell phone addiction. So how do we treat it then? So uh, let's see if we can identify some sort of framework to deal with these issues. So there's something called a pre-addiction process. So that's where our intervention would be more effective. Uh, of course, if the person is really addicted, then it's better that he sees a doctor, a psychiatrist, or somebody who can engage in better treatment, therapy, or something like that. But maybe we can suggest some ways, some tools. We can design some framework to address this problem at for what we can identify the pre-addiction process. And maybe you can see if there's some sort of an inflection point in the person's journey in that cycle towards becoming an addictive, fully blown addict, if there's any tipping point. So there is something called a pre-addiction process. The behavior kind of begins as being harmless and benign, no harmful or little or no harmful consequences of the engagement. For example, you start off by buying a cell phone for what? What's the excuse that we use for buying a smartphone? To stay in touch with people. Yeah, very innocuous, right? Very harmless. Yeah, so pay things, convenience. What else? Uber. Okay. Uber again, convenience. Okay. Shopping. Yeah. Shopping. Information. Yes. Information. Yeah. Stay in touch with family. Any other application?
I don't want to date. Even like getting on a plane. I flew on this one airline where they kept trying to get me to download the app just to get on the plane. Like it was so hard to get a boarding pass without downloading the app. It took me a lot of effort to avoid downloading the app. Yeah. So, like I couldn't even literally, if you didn't have a phone, how would you get on?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. If you don't have a yeah. Yeah.
If you lose your wallet, police station will not take your complaint. You go online.
Online register, is it? Okay. Okay. So yeah, convenience and productivity. We use productivity as a major excuse to engage with our phone. Yeah, so it kind of enhances productivity in different ways. So safety purposes, productivity, these are all reasons that we give to acquire, possess a phone. But it starts off as being a harmless engagement, but very soon it kind of evokes negative consequences when the usage starts getting excessive and the person starts becoming excessively dependent on the use of the phone. So, then it might manifest, these negative consequences manifest in what ways? Low productivity at work or school because of the intrusion of the cell phone on work or study time, or even through arguments with friends and family members over your usage time. And sometimes even through dangerous behaviors like texting while crossing the road or driving. It's become very common, right? So the original purpose of the purchase of phone was very innocuous, very harmless. But very soon your engagement with the phone gets buried under mountains of text messages, hours of Facebook time, hours on Instagram, or searching YouTube videos. So all these negative consequences begin to emerge. So before that happens, when we're still in the pre-addiction process, is there some point that we can identify as the tipping point or an inflection point? So we do kind of exhibit this kind of a tipping point where the addictive behavior, it reaches this tipping point where the affected individual is no longer able to control his usage of the smartphone. And the process has kind of evolved. The process of addiction has evolved from you having a liking for certain activity through your cell phone to actually craving and grasping at that activity, wanting to engage with that activity. So you start off using your social media, Instagram, because you like staying in touch with your friends and all that. But then slowly, kind of, you start craving for it. Even when you're not on Instagram, you're thinking about, okay, this is what I want to do on Instagram, or this is what I want to do on Facebook. Yeah. So liking has then evolved. It has taken on the form of craving or craving. And then craving becomes grasping. So this is what uh, we through our Buddhist psychological frameworks can uh, identify. A liking is become wanting, or it starts out as liking, then it takes on the form of craving, and then it takes on the form of grasping. So this switch from liking something to craving or wanting or needing something, this is referred to as the tipping point or the inflection point in the addiction process, in the process of pre-addiction. So if you're able to identify that point, then it would be very useful. So you can implement some sort of, deploy some sort of antidotes in that pre-addiction process. So this tipping or inflection point signals a shift from formerly harmless behavior towards something that we consider as pleasurable, uh, to, into something which has harmful consequences and has evolved into addictive behavior. Uh, Sometimes even, yeah, she referred to it, we resort to engagement with these kind of activities through our cell phone as an escape to something. So escape from boredom is one very strong factor. Yeah, most of us feel like, okay, I've done this for a sufficiently long time now. I need a social snack. So I take on my phone and start Instagramming and Facebooking and all that. Yeah. So it's kind of triggered by boredom. It's also kind of could be triggered by low self-esteem or impulsiveness. Yeah, interpersonal problems. So if you're able to identify the tipping point, then we can think about some uh, ways to handle the process in the pre-addiction stage. So how do we do that? Look for triggers. Yeah. Look for external triggers. Look for internal triggers. Your engagement with the cell phone is sometimes, as I said, in some cases it is triggered by excessive boredom, and it could take on some physical form also. Like you notice something, and then that tells you, okay, now you're bored. You're bored with what you've been doing so far, and hence you need to relieve that boredom. And cell phone is the gateway to relieve that boredom. So you look for these kind of triggers which drive us towards the addictive behavior. So, for example, you can think about an external event like you hear some sort of a song, and that song has a very melancholy kind of tone to it, and it makes you feel very sad or lonely. Yeah. And you may not be aware that you've heard the song, but when that feeling of loneliness gets triggered, it wells up internally, and you want to escape it. Yeah. And what do? You reach for your cell phone, or maybe uh, some other substance, could be a cigarette or alcohol or whatever, and you want to drown or do away with that loneliness, the sense of loneliness. So you look for these kind of external triggers. Yeah. The approach that you can use is either flee from the external trigger, and make sure that uh, you stay away uh, from the cell phone for some time. Yeah. Or freeze, just pause, don't do anything. Uh, just pause for some time. There are also internal triggers, mental states that could build up within you, and then that could trigger some emotion. And that emotion could trigger you in the direction, would drive you in the direction of engaging with your cell phone. So look for these kind of external and internal triggers. So the first step is to try and see if you can have some approach to disarm these external and internal triggers. So the approach could be the flee or freeze. That's uh, easier easy way to deal with it. And uh, at the start, we had identified impulsivity as an important uh, risk factor that could drive us towards the source of addiction. So impulsivity is a key psychological factor that could develop into an addiction. So how do we deal with impulsivity? Any idea? How do
the harmful effects of what you're doing.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, being mindful, yes, that's right. So that's the first step before you can think about the harmful effects. Be mindful, okay, that trigger is leading to this impulse. So be mindful, yeah. So mindfulness is an important tool. So what does mindfulness help you with? It makes you aware of what you're feeling, yeah. And what will it do? It will help you pause long enough to stop yourself from practicing a behavior that is addictive. So we have these excuses when we engage with the cell phone that it's a tool that helps you save time. It helps you to be productive. But at the same time, we know that our behavior does not lead to any kind of saving of time, uh, and it's impossible for you to stop yourself from engaging with the smartphone, with the cell phone. So when you have this, that you're going to use the phone only if it saves time or it helps you with being productive. You have that as a strong resolve, then be mindful about that resolve. And if that resolve is getting compromised, then you stop, you pause, yeah, and you observe how that impulse is, taking on the shape of a craving, and you can then implement or deploy some sort of an antidote to deal with it. So often we find ourselves avoiding some underlying discomfort or emotional issues, uh, or even maybe just boredom, as we had seen. And we impulsively kind of reach out to have some consuming some addictive snack or junk food, or grabbing a smoke, or reaching for another drink, or surfing the internet. So these days, um, our gateway is what? Surfing the internet. So that's the easiest way to deal with boredom and such kind of triggers. So mindfulness also helps us kind of attend to our uh, experience on a moment-to-moment basis. Yeah? And it helps us to observe if we are developing any kind of impulsive urge to reach out heedlessly or mindlessly to that next serving of potato chip, or playing another game on the cell phone, or just clicking the purchase button in our online shopping cart. So if you're mindful, you can just pause that process for a while. You can just maybe take a few moments and then see whether it's absolutely necessary, whether it's serving your purpose of saving time or being more productive. If not, then you can redirect your mind to something else. So that's how mindfulness can help you. It can help you observe and explore your habitual patterns of reactivity to these external and internal triggers. So mindfulness is an important tool. Then with mindfulness also what you can do is you can, there's this trigger, the trigger has driven some sort of an impulse, the impulse is now taking on the form of a craving, and the craving is going to lead to some sort of grasping later on. So what we need to do is, of course, start off with mindfulness and see whether that impulse is becoming strong and regulate that impulse. But if it's reached the stage where it is taken on the form of craving, you crave for some pleasure and you don't have access to it right now, what you can do is you can ride the wave of craving. Yeah? So build some sort of resilience and you crave to relieve some sort of immediate discomfort that you're experiencing right now. So if you ride the wave of craving, then you can, what you need to ride the wave of craving is that you need some resilience towards this immediate discomfort that you're experiencing. So building resilience, enhanced resilience or tolerance in patience or tolerance that we've seen in our previous sessions in dealing with anger. So we build tolerance to discomfort and pain, build resilience to discomfort and pain. So cravings arise and gradually peak. Yeah? If you observe, they will arise, they will kind of intensify, they will reach a peak, and then they will ebb away. So if you've been disciplined enough, just observing the craving, not reacting to it, then you'll find that after a while, it will just ebb away, it will just kind of subside. So that will need some sort of resilience from your side. So you can invest in cultivating this resilience, it will be helpful. So as we had seen in the previous session also, so you build resilience to discomfort. How cultivate a good view, the right view that suffering, actually discomfort is a part of our reality. It's a natural fact of our existence. So there are more factors in our environment that can lead to discomfort and pain than there are conditions that can lead to joy and happiness. So just stay with it. Don't push yourself to react. Wanting to kind of do away with that discomfort immediately. Just stay with it, and you'll find that you're able to handle it. Build that kind of tolerance and resilience to discomfort. So what you can do is you can deploy what is called this trinity or triad of mindfulness, introspection, and equanimity to deal with your addictive behavior. So when the triggers manifest and then they drive this impulse, the impulse takes on the form of craving. What you can do is you can deploy this three-pronged approach of mindfulness, introspection, and equanimity. How can you use mindfulness? How does mindfulness? Yes, notice the trigger and notice how it is kind of morphing into an impulse, and the impulse is taking on the form of craving. So what do? You keep in mind the resolve that you have, that I'll not touch my smartphone unless it is for some critical use. What is the critical use? Either saving time or productivity, or whatever other justified use that you can think of. So that's how mindfulness will help you. It will keep your mind on that resolve. But if you find that your mind is kind of straying away from the resolve, then what will help you bring it back? It's introspection, the other mental factor of introspection. So introspection checks whether the mind is being mindful or not. Mindful of what? This resolve that you have. And if it is straying away from the resolve, it brings it back gently to the resolve. And then the third element of our approach is equanimity. So what does equanimity do? How would equanimity help? What is equanimity? How would be relevant in this context? Equanimity. Okay.
So if you're using the same formula. Product.
Right. Okay. It's kind of asking you to stay neutral in this process.
Not
yes. Yeah, so you're experiencing discomforts, right? So you're generating aversion to that discomfort.
Also, because sometimes you choose something because you're so bored of your life. You think your life is so boring. So that's why you're chasing.
But boredom also is a discomforting kind of experience.
Yes.
Yeah. So when these sensations, these feelings kind of manifest, you stay kind of neutral, even-minded. Yeah, you do not make any kind of judgment about it. Remain non-judgmental. So, equanimity, what it does is, you know, when the craving manifests and you're being deprived of the source that you crave, you're experiencing increasing kind of mental discomfort and physical discomfort. Uh, your mind starts kind of dramatizing this experience. The fact that you're deprived of that source of pleasure, your mind is kind of overreacting to it. Yeah, it's trying to dramatize the negative consequences of you being deprived of that source of addiction. So equanimity will help you stop that dramatizing, and it will help you remain even-minded or non-judgmental when these cravings arise. It will help you note what is happening, and it will help you not go overboard with your emotional reactions. So these are the three uh, means or tools that we can deploy: mindfulness, introspection, and equanimity. It is.
very difficult for that person to resist that.
Yes, it is.
Then when the doctor deny it and start doing something other than get back to
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
And it has to become
First step is very difficult. Yeah, just being mindful. Yeah, it's very difficult. We don't even know. Yeah. Yeah. Even the first step is very difficult. But you need to kind of persevere. You need to persist with it. And then it could help you. Yeah. So this is how
Venerable,
yeah.
could it also, one way to deal with it is, I don't know if that's equanimity, but to imagine that you have actually succumbed to your addiction. Like, if it's a cell phone use, you say, okay, let's say I pick it up and you're struggling with it. You say, okay, I'll pick it up. And I know from experience an hour would have gone by before I am able to. And then you tell yourself how that wasted hour would, make you feel. It'll make you feel bad about yourself and, bad about the fact that you've lost work time or whatever. If you're like an alcohol addict, you think about how that, having those drinks will then make you feel hungover and, people will. So looking at the result, which is quite familiar to you, and
Yes,
seeing
it's going to be an iterative process, right? So
right.
you engage, and then maybe initially, of course, you don't have that control. You do not employ any of these antidotes. Um, the addiction process kind of unfolds to its full extent. Negative consequences manifest, but then you are aware of the negative consequences, and then you come back and say, okay, this is not right. I still need to uh, regulate my use of cell phone only for critical purposes. So then you come back to your resolve. So you become mindful of that resolve. And then gradually you can enhance your mindfulness. And with enhanced mindfulness, you can also use enhanced introspection and equanimity. So it will be iterative. It will be iterative in that sense. So in addition to this is more like a transactional kind of process approach. You're kind of still waiting for that addiction, the first steps of this addiction to manifest. Of course, we can't rely on this approach always. What we need is a more robust kind of philosophical framework to deal with these kind of addictions. So, what kind of a philosophical framework would we have? And I mean, studied Buddhism for some time. So, what is the best way to deal with addictions? Yeah, you could you design a philosophical framework for yourself.
It is like this life is not only about me, but this is about my service to others. So
Yes.
taking care of myself is not just about me, but is my purpose in this life.
Yeah. So you have an important point. Yeah, your responses are not only to address your own concerns. So self-centeredness is driving your addiction in a way. So if you are aware of that and you shift the focus, transpose the focus of that cherishing attitude to others, then it can help you. So yeah, that's a very robust way of dealing with addiction. Yeah. Any other suggestion? Yeah.
Could you maybe like have some compassion for yourself and think that maybe this addiction came from like previous conditions from like the previous life?
Yeah.
And then think if like now is a good opportunity to work with it because
Right.
if you don't kind of bring something just like stay with you and become a habit
Right.
like in your next life.
Yes.
So
Yeah, you need to be kind and compassionate towards yourself. Yeah, and not lose hope. Yeah, you're trying and maybe you don't get the desired result, but don't be too hard on yourself. You know that this is a manifestation of causes and conditions, and those causes and conditions could be some imprints from the past, and maybe those imprints are uh, very strong, and you need to put in more effort. So you go back with a more positive kind of attitude, and try and deal with it.
I just remember a friend of ours from the world of who was lost, went through tragedy, lost their child, and bad state and became an addict, lost their home, was a lawyer, lost their home. Had by their friends to see this great man coming to San Francisco, and had become a really bad version of themselves and was very unhappy and all of that, and then met His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Okay.
And they were in to the Heart Sutra thing 10 or something in San Francisco, maybe even earlier. Right? They were standing in the line, and Venerable, you know how His Holiness is obsessed with hair, right? So then they saw them and pulled them by the ear. All these people have pulled them by the ear. And His Holiness said, "Sir, do you do drugs?" And this man did not know what to say. He said, "Yes." And then he said, "Oh, helping you."
Yeah. Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
was a moment that helped him
Yeah.
evaluate.
Yes, so we need to have a proper philosophical framework as a defense against these kind of addictive tendencies that we have. We all have addictive tendencies, can't deny it. We need to kind of find some sort of source of inspiration, and keep ourselves inspired to stay away from these negative tendencies that we have. So what we need is some sort of a meaningful or effective life philosophy. So if your life philosophy is that, as Lavanya mentioned, prioritize my own gain, my own goals, do what I can do for myself, don't worry about anything else, then it's going to make you both yourself and others miserable. It's going to make others unhappy. And especially through the influence of this addictive behavior or addiction that you have, you're going to end up just having fewer and fewer friends. On the other hand, somebody might have an attitude or indifference towards life, and nothing matters. So if you have that kind of an attitude, that kind of philosophical orientation, again, what happens is you end up being insensitive to the pain and the suffering of other people. Nothing matters, is what the person says. So into those kind of philosophical frameworks would be very counterproductive, and the people who have these kind of frameworks would probably be more exposed to their addictive tendencies. So what you need is to have some sort of a more positive, a more sunny, more warm kind of life philosophy or attitude. Maybe what Lavanya was mentioning, and what Nicole was also suggesting, that you value others just as much as you do value yourself, and that you care deeply for them. So this is kind of framework, that a philosophical rule that you could have that will prevent you from moving in that direction towards any kind of addiction. So it also, if you have this kind of a positive, sunny attitude, then it helps you, it enhances your self-esteem also, it nourishes your self-esteem. Um, typically what we notice is that we lack, most people lack this fundamental sense of a philosophical hope. It's all scattered. They don't have a proper kind of defined philosophical um, defense to deal with these kind of negative tendencies. So if we have this kind of a philosophical framework, then it will definitely yield more positive results. So every time you stay away from this philosophical boundaries that you've defined for your life, and when you come back, you'll find that there's more wholeness to your life, there's more integrity and more goodness in life. I mean, that inspires you. Yeah. Uh, Instead of feeling broken or feeling that there's something missing from your life, you have this feeling that your life is far more defined, it's far more whole, there's more integrity and goodness in your life. So you emerge feeling better about yourself and hence better about life in general and also better about the world in general. So you have that kind of more positive philosophical attitude instead of having the counterpart of it, the opposite of it, which is just going to lead to you having some sort of anxiety, fear about the world, about yourself, about your family, about your environment. So all these kind of irrational fears, then they can become possible triggers or risks to drive you in the direction of uh, addiction. For example, the fear of being a social outcast. What does it do? Mm, You, uh, it drives you to excessive engagement with social media. One of the major reasons why a person wants to engage with social media so excessively is that because he feels that if he doesn't do so, then he's going to be a social outcast. And there's a person who has been on my back for a very long time now. I haven't used Facebook ever. So there's this person who keeps saying, keeps kind of telling me about the virtues of Facebook. And, he's been on my back for a very long time. You should have Facebook, you should have Facebook. And this is the way it's going to benefit you and all that. Well, of course, I mean, it is beneficial, but there are other ways of serving the same purpose. So maybe it's not absolutely necessary. It can be beneficial. Yeah. Uh, the other thing that Lavanya mentioned is lose a grip on the self-centered attitude that we generally display. So, what does this self-centered attitude do in the context of addiction? What does it do? It says that you have a right to be happy. This addiction says that you have a right to be happy, and this addiction will make you more happy. And also the other side that sometimes we end up feeling that I can't cope up with this. I can't cope with this nonsense, this difficult situation. I need a break. It's all too much for me. And if these kind of fears, these kind of attitudes manifest, then it's going to kind of drive you towards addiction. And all this is kind of a manifestation of your self-centered attitude, which, as I've mentioned, what it does is it kind of dramatizes or it catastrophizes the disasters that you're likely to experience if you are deprived of the source of addiction. So it's important for us to expose these exaggerations that your self-centered attitude manifests. And how do you deal with these exaggerations? So the source of addiction that you have, your self-centeredness is telling you that this source of addiction is going to be the source of joy and happiness and bliss for you. But we know from our discussion on what impermanence that all these phenomena, what are they? They're impure. Uh, they are unsatisfactory. They are this quality of being unsatisfactory and then impermanent. So deploy some of that knowledge of impermanence to deal with these exaggerations. Yeah. And then there are all kinds of myths and realities of happiness and pleasure. So addiction starts because we experience pleasure through contact with the source of addiction. There's nothing wrong with being happy, feeling good about our engagement with that source of joy or happiness, but it's the wanting to hang on to that happiness, that feeling of happiness. It's that wanting, craving. That is what is the problem. So we become unhappy when we don't have access to this good feeling. That is what then creates problems. So, what is this state of mind that we have this forever we exhibit this craving or wanting to be united with the source of happiness, but we also know that the source of happiness or happiness, perceived happiness, uh, it's not going to be a source of happiness forever. It's going to transform because it has this impermanent nature. So this is what we call as the suffering of change, right? So from our discussion on suffering, we've seen that the suffering, the suffering of change, and all pervasive conditioned suffering. So just recollect your discussions on suffering of change. So however much we try to hang on to this sources of nice feeling or happiness, they can't last forever. That's the quality, the property that object has. It is suffering. The object is suffering. And what kind of suffering? It is suffering of change. So think about the suffering of change nature of the objects. So addiction is about wanting happiness, but the happiness comes with addiction. Addiction is mostly in the nature of temporary, impermanent pleasure. So let's not get trapped into this kind of temporary, impermanent pleasure. There are better sources of happiness. Let's think about those durable sources of happiness. So that's how you temper your craving by reflecting on what the suffering of change. So this is another way you can deal with your craving for the source of addiction. And then a very important, this is the last point, so after this we'll stop. A very important antidote. We have a nice philosophical framework. We also had a more transactional framework to deal with addiction. The best way to deal with addiction is what's the best way to deal with possible addiction, potential addiction? Stay away from these sources. Yeah? So abstinence, absolute abstinence. Yeah? And it's something that very heavily emphasized in our teachings. For example, as upasaks, we have this upasak vows.
Retreat, Venerable, retreat or rehabilitation.
Or that's after you have got married, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But what we are talking about is how to prevent addiction. And abstinence is the best way to do it. And abstinence from all kinds of sources of addiction, whether it is alcohol or drugs. So, as upasaks, the Buddha has given the upasak vows. And do you remember the vows, the upasak vows? What are the upasak vows? Yeah, the 5 precepts, yes.
Abstinence from lying, abstinence from sexual misconduct, abstinence from stealing, and abstinence from intoxicants.
Yes. So you'll notice there's a difference between the first 4 and the last one. Yeah, so I'll come to that difference. So the 5th precept, as you mentioned, is abstinence from intoxicating drinks. So yeah.
Somebody asked if I was a once in Sarah that they had a smoking problem, this alcohol, this cigarette. Then they said if it alters your mind, then it's
yeah. So that is the underlying principle behind this precept. So what is the precept? The precept says that I undertake the training rule to abstain from fermented and distilled intoxicants. So the actual words say that I would abstain from fermented and distilled intoxicants, which are the basis for heedlessness. Heedlessness. Yeah. So that is the guiding purpose. So in Pali, the precept says, Sura mera majjapamada thana veramani sikka padam samadhyami. So Sura is alcohol. Mera is fermented drink. And Madhya is a distinct kind of intoxicant. So here, would this rule of abstinence, would it prescribe the use of drugs?
Yes.
Awesome.
Because it's what alcohol content.
Drugs?
No, no, it is well.
Drugs.
It's not fermented.
It's not fermented, it's not alcohol, it's not distilled.
Paracetamol is 4% alcohol.
Okay. Paracetamol. Is it intoxicating though? That's it.
I mean, it makes you drowsy and sleep.
Drowsy, okay. Yeah. What about the other drugs, the hard drugs? Do they have
They have
alcohol content in it?
they don't have alcohol.
So then it doesn't have an intoxicant. It's not fermented.
Yeah, she's saying.
Chemical is that distillation?
Yeah, the words in the rule, they talk about distilled alcohol, distilled. So you make it strong. So there's fermented, and then you distill that further to make it strong, and it becomes a more potent kind of intoxicant. So this rule then prescribe the use of cigarettes, also prescribe the use of drugs.
But it's mind-altering.
Oh, so that is the guiding purpose. So the rule doesn't just say that you need to abstain from these, but it says which are the basis of heedlessness. Yeah, so it alters your ability to be mindful. So if it is compromising your ability to be mindful, then something that you need to abstain from. So the precept implicitly prescribes the use of drugs by way of its guiding purpose, which is to prevent heedlessness. Heedlessness is caused by intoxicant, whether it's alcohol or fermented drinks. Yeah? So you need to be aware of this guiding purpose. There's also another way in which the fifth precept is different from the first four. So the first four, they directly involve the practitioner's relationship with his fellow beings. In order to kill, you kill somebody who's distinct from yourself, right? Yeah, lying also same, sexual misconduct also same, and then steal also same, right? But what about the final one? It's about your own self, right? So in that sense, is it really, does that rule really fall within the moral sphere, ethical sphere? Or is it just about personal hygiene, or what is it? Yeah. So that's the point. So the first four precepts clearly belong to the moral sphere, whereas this sphere, I mean, there's a question mark on whether it's ethical in character or it's just merely hygienic. But the answer is that it is ethical because it has a decisive effect on others. Now, how does it impact others?
Because I is under the influence of something,
Yeah.
you are not revealing your true nature. Your true nature could be altered.
Yes.
It could be hurtful. If it is joyful, it's not permanent, it's a temporary thing, then because some people get very joyful after alcohol.
Yes.
It may be temporary, and then after the effects could be very bad. So
Yeah,
it's playing with your mind.
That's true, yeah. So taking intoxicants can influence the ways in which we interact with others. And then ultimately it kind of leads to violation of all the five precepts. So not just one, it leads to a violation of all the five precepts. Because the person becomes mindless, he becomes heedless. So you've heard all of you have heard that story, yeah. So maybe you won't repeat it, yeah. So you become heedless, and then you engage in stealing because you want to source your source of addiction. You could kill somebody for it. You of course lie. At the least, you lie to acquire. To ensure that you have a constant access to the source of addiction, intoxicant. And you could also engage in adultery. So in that sense, the last rule also kind of has a direct relationship with your fellow beings. Yeah. So that's how the fifth precept is similar to the earlier four precepts. So
Venerable,
yeah.
but in the intoxicant precept, it
Yes.
is possible, and like so many people do it, indulge in, let's say, a glass of wine or a beer and continue it through their life without ever slipping into addiction or, whatever, harming others and stuff like self and all that. So how does it, I mean, yes,
Yes.
carry it to an excess. Yes, you could be compromised. It relates to others, but if it is not done to excess, then
Yes.
it doesn't
Yeah, you're
probably.
right. Yeah, you're right. So the guiding purpose, as it was mentioned in the rule, is that it makes you heedless. So you don't drink to the point that you lost your mind. Yeah, you completely unaware of your environment, and you engage in all kinds of funny behavior later on. So a glass of wine which doesn't compromise your ability to remain mindful of your environment should be okay. Or it's used even for cooking purposes, right? Alcohol, wine is used in cooking. Maybe it's permissible to that extent. But if it compromises your ability to remain mindful, then it is a problem. Then you need to be careful.
But Venerable, see, for example, my addiction to coffee, I know like if I drink 1 cup of coffee every day in the morning, it is not going to harm me. But in the meanwhile, this particular Lavanya can do better without that coffee in the morning. So it compromises the quality of my life in the long run. See, I can be better without it.
Yeah. I mean, the compromise could be of different form, different shape. Here, it's specifically about uh, becoming heedless, compromising your mindfulness.
Yeah.
So your consumption of coffee does not compromise it, then this rule does not apply. This rule of abstinence does not apply. Okay, so these are the 5 rules of abstinence. So here's an exercise for you. Now, the Buddha prescribed these rules, these precepts in a different time. Yeah? And we know from our discussion today that there are other forms of, other sources of addiction which could compromise your ability to remain mindful and all that. And we saw that cell phones, smartphones could be one such source. So if we were to design a 6th precept for our modern times, what could be the form of that abstinence rule? So how would you prescribe a more specific abstinence rule pertaining to cell phones to add to the first 5? Yeah. So think about, I mean, when you design rule, you think about what is the thing that you're trying to prevent. Sorry?
For entertainment.
Look for entertainment within. Okay. Careful use of time. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay.
The cell phone takes time.
Yes. Right.
Okay. I didn't do it yesterday, I didn't do it this short.
Yeah.
And today could be the last part of my life.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Careful use of time. So I will undertake the practice of engaging careful use of time. Okay, one way of prescribing, yes, this rule of abstention. Yeah, we need to be more very specific. Yeah.
Don't believe your mind when it tricks you about FOMO or about boredom. That boredom has to be solved. Why? Whenever actually, when we were young, in the 80s, I don't know that all of you are, then we were left alone a lot of time to fend for our way, to take care of our own boredom and survive. We never felt bored.
We never felt bored. Yeah. Okay, anyway, so the exercise for you is think about a very specific abstinence rule. Yeah? You know about the harmful effects. You think about how the Buddha has designed the previous 5 abstinence rules. So if you feel that the 5th precept is good enough to kind of include this activity also, then fine. Or if you think that it needs to be added, yeah. So think about the 6th abstinence rule. Yeah. So that's an exercise for your homework. Yeah. Okay. So we'll pause here. I think you're already overshot of this time. So we'll just end with a short dedication. Or I'll do a short meditation. We don't have time. Okay, so just relax, relax posture, and maybe take a moment to gather your thoughts. Use your breath to focus your mind. And just recollect the discussion on addiction that we just had. Think about the core components of any kind of addiction. Think about the experiential characteristics of addiction, and see if some of those characteristics are evident in some of our behavior in our life. And if it's so, does it display symptoms similar to addiction to substance abuse or addictive behavior like gambling? And also just recollect the framework of the triad of mindfulness, introspection, and equanimity, and also um, having a more positive philosophical kind of defense to deal with addiction, and also the abstinence rules. So just recollect our discussion. Just take a moment to reflect on that. Sure that we've accumulated some merit through our participation in this discussion. Let's direct that merit to our complete enlightenment. So due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all sentient beings without exception into an enlightened state. May the supreme jewel Bodhicitta that is not arising, arise and grow. And may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Okay, Namo Buddha. Thank you all for time and patience. Thank you. Again.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Madhvi. Yeah. Thank you,
Thank you,
Lavanya.
Venerable. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yeah.